in this part of the world, we're building up to a huge Interpro, really. And it's early in the season still, and it almost has suddenly come upon us. We've had a couple of good Interpros in the last few weekends, but this might be a step up with Leinster hosting Munster in the Viva Stadium on Saturday evening. It's going to be a cracking occasion. And how do you think Leinster will be feeling about this? Because normally they'd almost got to the point of not taking for granted, never, but having that confidence that they were going to beat Munster yet again, and that's suddenly been flipped on its head.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's reignited the rivalry, hasn't it? Which is a good thing for the neutral, particularly, and obviously Munster supporters. That it's by no means a foregone conclusion. I think we'll pick into maybe the game from last year in a little bit more detail as the pod goes on. But obviously, the evolution of Munster's game, the more dynamic attack they have, the multiple threats at the line. They caused Leinster a huge amount of problems last year, understanding it was a weakened Leinster selection. And it'd be interesting if Cullen had his time over, would he have gone stronger to ensure the win and getting into a URC final? So I think there'll be a massive chip on Leinster's shoulders. I think they'll go as strong as they possibly can, you'd imagine, with complementing the starting 15 with as many of the Irish World Cup contingent as possible. So it promises to be a fascinating battle. I really hope we get a dry track, because we've seen the attacking prowess and ambition of both teams. So it could be an absolute mouth-watering occasion with some really interesting head-to-heads as well.
It's set to be dry at the moment, so fingers crossed that holds for the coming days. I totally agree with you. It's the conditions we want, and I can just imagine that Leinster group just brimming with motivation to get out there this weekend and prove a point to themselves and to everyone else that they're top dogs, if that was in question. Some big doubts over Peter O'Mahony and Jack O'Donoghue, and Munster are kind of stringing this one along, but it does look like they won't be involved. They haven't been training, and yeah, it is a big game, but we saw them both go off with those kind of injury worries last weekend. How much would that change for them with O'Mahony in particular, obviously as captain, but also a really key component to what they do?
Yeah, and it probably the absence of Snyman, Klein, particularly, like the two of your World Cup winning Springboks unavailable, like, because obviously you can push Ty Brown back to 6 if those two are there, but it would be a big ask to go in with Thomas Ahern and Ed Ogbo, wasn't it, in such a high profile game to move Byrne to 6, but potentially that's what they might have to do. So yeah, I think the injuries, particularly to O'Mahony and O'Donoghue, probably just further accentuates the massive loss of Snyman, obviously in particular, as like one of their star players. You saw the impact he had tail end of the URC, and that his impact off the bench was defining, and probably the final win against the Stormers.
That would be exciting at the same time to see a Dogbo and Ahern maybe in a second row, given their form early in the season, given the potential that we've spoken about a lot, and a big game like that just accelerates everything again. But yeah, it felt like Munster would have needed to be at full tilt again, and their form so far this season has been a little bit patchy. Even that flow in their attack that was there at the end of last season hasn't quite been as consistent. The scrum obviously has been a big concern in the last couple of weeks, with some costly losses there against Ulster, and particularly against the Stormers, where they really got dominated a few times. And Leinster will be, as always, licking their lips about set piece, because while we discuss their attack lots, and we'll come to discuss their defence so much now with Nienaber coming in, that set piece stuff is really key to their and everyone else's game. You mentioned their most recent meeting in the semi-final last season, with Jack Crowley nailing that drop goal to win it. And I do want to get into that. But just out of interest, as an analyst, how much does a game like this, and it is relatively recent in fairness, does it actually, when you're coming in towards playing the same opposition again, do you often dwell on fixtures like that, or is it more recent games you're more concerned about?
I think you definitely do. I think the intriguing stat from a Munster perspective was volume of kicks was relatively high. They kicked 26 times for 907 meters. Leinster only got 7 lineouts in the game, and were disrupted on 2 of them. We understand this, how much momentum Leinster get from their lineout launches. Even look at the Scarlets game from last weekend. A huge amount of their their fluidity comes from those really intricate first phase starters that get into shape exceptionally well. And that strategy worked brilliantly for Munster. They denied them those options to launch off line out, and which was a theme of the entire game.